Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Samech Gimel Amar Aleph, 63a of Maseches Kiddushin. We're starting with the Mishnah, which is 4 lines from the bottom of the page. The Mishnah says, Al menas sheyirtze Abba. If a man says, I'm giving you Kiddushin on condition that my father approves. So the Mishnah says, so this is a conditional Kiddushin. So the Mishnah says, Ratza ha'av mikudeshes. If his father approves, then the Kiddushin works. V'im lav, and if not, eina mikudeshes, then she is not mikudesh, she's not betrothed. Mesav. What if the father dies? It says, Harezu mikudeshes. Then it is a good Kiddushin. Now, it's not clear when the father died. After he heard about it, before, it's not so clear. Then the Mishnah says, Meis haben, if the son died, so he gave her this conditional Kiddushin, and then at some point he died, then melamding ha'av lomar she'eno rotze. Then we tell the father, we teach the father to say that he doesn't approve of the Kiddushin. So it's not clear when everything is going on here. When is the father approving, not approving? How does he express his approval? So that's what the Gemara is going to try to dissect here. So the Gemara asks, "My almanash yirtze Abba." What does it mean when he says on condition that my father? It really doesn't mean approve. It means he wants it, on condition that he wants it, that he desires it. So how do we confirm that? At what point do we say, okay, the father wants it, it's a good Kiddushin? So ilay ma'ad de amar Abba in. So if you say it's not a good Kiddushin until the father says yes, he approves, he verbally approves it. So that would explain the beginning of the Mishnah, right? It says, on condition that my father approves, if the father approves, then it's a good Kiddushin. So it could be, how does the father approve? He says yes. If he says yes, it's a good Kiddushin. And if he says no, if he doesn't say yes, then it's not a good Kiddushin. So the Gemara says, but let's look at the middle case. The middle case was, Meis ha'av harezu mikudeshes. If the father dies, so then it's also a good Kiddushin. Now, if the father had already said yes, then that would be obvious. Once he says yes, it's a good Kiddushin. So it must be that he didn't say yes yet, and he died. So why is it a good Kiddushin? Ask the Gemara, V'halo amar in. He never gave his approval. The Kiddushin was on condition that he says yes, and he gives his approval. He died before he had a chance to give his approval. So why would it be a good Kiddushin? The Mishnah says if the father dies, then it's a good Kiddushin. So it can't be that the condition was, when he said on condition that my father approves, it couldn't have meant on condition that my father says yes. So rather, top of the next page, Amanas sheyishtok Abba. So then it must be on condition, when he says on condition that my father approves, it means he doesn't say no. He doesn't disapprove, right? And therefore if he dies, he didn't disapprove, he never said no, so then it could be a good Kiddushin. So, and I guess going back to the beginning, of the Mishnah, so it would be on condition that my father approves. If the father approves, meaning he doesn't say no, so then it's a good Kiddushin. If he doesn't approve, meaning he says no, right now we're in the step where it's going to depend if he's quiet. So if the father's quiet, then it's a good Kiddushin. If he's not quiet, in other words, he says no, then it's not a good Kiddushin. If he dies, then he was quiet. So it would be a good Kiddushin. But then, ask the Gemara, Ema Seifa. But what about the last case? The last case says, Meis haben melamding ha'av lomar she'eno rotze. If the son dies, we teach the father to say that he doesn't want it. Now, what does that mean? So we would be talking about a case where the son died without any children, and the wife would fall to Yibum. Now, often it's preferable that she not fall to Yibum. That could cause complications. So if we have a chance to uproot the whole marriage in the first place, so that would be a preference, and that's what the Mishnah is telling us, that we want, since the husband died, we want to teach the father to say no. And but apparently by saying no, that would be enough. Even though it must be he was originally quiet, but we give him, he still has the chance later to say no, apparently. Amai. And the Gemara asks, why would that work? V'hashasik. If the condition was, on condition that my father approves, which means on condition that he's silent, and he was silent, then it's too late. If the son dies, the father can't then later say, actually, I changed my mind. It's too late. He was quiet. That was the condition. The condition was if you're quiet, if the father's quiet, if he doesn't disapprove, so then, and he's just silent, so then it's a good Kiddushin. And that happens. So how could we later teach the father to change his mind, to say, I reject it, to uproot the whole thing? That wasn't the condition. The condition was on condition that he's quiet. So rather, that couldn't. It can't be that was the condition. So, Ella, so rather, it must be Amar la Menashe lo yimcha Abba. It must be the condition was on condition that my father does not protest. Now that's going to work for this last case. On condition that my father does not protest at any point in time. And if at any point in time the father protests, then the whole thing is uprooted. And in this case, the son died, we tell the father, protest. And if you protest, it will uproot the whole thing. That fits. That could be what it means on condition that my father approves, means on condition that he doesn't protest. But if at any point he protests, so then it won't be a good Kiddushin. So we could teach him later to protest. Now, and that could also work for the middle case, because the middle case was if the father dies, so then it's a good Kiddushin. Well, once the father dies, he's not going to protest. So at that point, it's also going to be a good Kiddushin. So, but the problem is that the first case can't make sense this way. Because the first case said, the beginning of the Mishnah said, if the father approves, it's a good Kiddushin. Now, 1 second. He could still protest later. And look, even in the case where the son dies, that's what we have him do. Apparently he was okay with it earlier, and now the son died, we say protest and cancel the whole thing. So how can we say at the beginning that it's a good Kiddushin? It's who says? We still don't know. The father at any point could still protest until he dies. So the Gemara makes this point. The Gemara says, Reisha b'chad taima, mitziyasa v'seifa b'chad taima. It seems like the Reisha, the beginning of the Mishnah, understands this condition in one way, and the middle case and the last case understand it a different way. The beginning of the Mishnah understands, apparently, that when a person says, on condition that on condition that my father approves, it meant on condition that he says yes. So if he says yes, it works. If he doesn't say yes, it doesn't work. And later, it sounds like it's on condition that he doesn't protest, that he doesn't reject it. So Rabbi Yanai said yes. It's two different cases, and Rabbi Yanai is saying that it's two different cases, and he said two different things. The beginning of the Mishnah was really a case where he said on condition that my father says yes. And the end of the Mishnah, the middle and the end, is a case where he says a condition on condition that my father doesn't protest. And it's two different cases in the Mishnah. Now, that's a little bit of what we call a dochik, a little bit of a stretch, because it's, it doesn't say that. It just says on condition that he approves. And it doesn't say how that approval is expressed. It does say that the beginning of the Mishnah, he said, is really where his condition was on condition that he says yes, and the end of the Mishnah, the middle and the end, is on condition that he doesn't protest. So that's a bit of what we would call a dochak. But the Gemara says, Amar Reish Lakish says, Shema Mina, we can learn from Rabbi Yanai, saying the Mishnah is talking about two different cases, that that it's our preference to make the Mishnah two different cases, even though it's a dochak, even though it's a stretch, but keep it under one authorship, rather than say it's two different authors, two different opinions, but that he said the same thing. In other words, we could have learned the Mishnah to mean that really he just said on condition that my father approves. And the question would be, what does that mean? And the first part of the Mishnah would be would be according to one Tana, one opinion, who holds that what it means is on condition that he says yes. And the second time, the end of the Mishnah will be a different opinion. No, when you say on condition that my father approves, it means on condition that he doesn't protest. And it will be a machlokes, it will be a dispute within the Mishnah, the first opinion and the second opinion. But that's not what Rabbi Yanai says. Rabbi Yanai says, no. I'd rather say that the Mishnah is two different cases where he said the two things explicitly. It's not a question of where he said, on condition my father approves, and it's a dispute how to understand that, and to split the Mishnah into two different opinions. I'd rather keep it's all one opinion, and it's a stretch, but we have to say that it's two different cases. The first case is where he said explicitly on condition my father says yes, and the second case is it's where he said on condition my father doesn't protest. And that, says Abaye, we see Rabbi Yanai has this preference to say that and keep it under one author rather than making it into a machlokas and say it's two authors. Rav Yosef Bar Ami says a different interpretation. Le'olam chad taimahu. Really, it's one thing that was said. Umay al menash yirtza abba. What does it mean when he says on condition that my father approves? What it means is, it means one thing. It means on condition that my father doesn't protest between now and 30 days. That's what it means. That's the case of the Mishnah. The Mishnah's case is where he said, or either he said explicitly or it's interpreted to mean that it's on condition that my father doesn't protest in the next 30 days. So now there's a limit to when the father could protest. And now we would say that the beginning of the Mishnah says, if the father approves, meaning 30 days pass and he doesn't protest, then it's a good Kiddushin. If he does protest within 30 days, then it's not a good Kiddushin. That's the first case of the Mishnah. If the father dies within the 30 days, well, he's not going to be protesting then, so then it's also going to be a good Kiddushin. If the son dies within 30 days, so then we teach the father to protest right away, right? If the son died within 30 days, obviously there are no children. She's going to fall to Yibum. So there, within those 30 days, we tell the father, protest within the 30 days so we can uproot the marriage and the wife won't have to fall to Yibum. That is how Rav Yosef Bar Ami interprets the Mishnah. Okay, another Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Kidashti as biti. A man says, I accepted Kiddushin on behalf of my daughter, Ve'eni yodea lami kidashtiya, but I don't know who I accepted the Kiddushin from. So he married off his daughter, he doesn't know who the guy is, who the lucky man is. Uba echad ve'amar ani kidashtiya. And along comes a guy and he says, I'm the one who gave her Kiddushin. Says the Mishnah, Naaman, the guy is believed. That's case number one. Again, the case is, a man accepts Kiddushin on behalf of his daughter, and he says, I don't know who I accepted the Kiddushin from. A guy comes along and says, it was me. Naaman, the Mishnah says he's believed. Now, what if two people come? One of them says, it was me, and another guy says, no, it was me. So then, Shneim nosnim get. They should both give a get. We don't know who she's married to. They should both give a get. However, the Mishnah says, Vimratsu, but if they want, if they can agree on it, Echad nosin get, ve'echad kones. One of them could give a get, and the other one could marry her. He should maybe give another Kiddushin again, just in case he never gave Kiddushin the first time. But, so we could be certain, but that's the other option. Really, one of them gives a get, and then the other guy, if she was really married to the first guy, he already gave a get, and now she can marry the second guy. If she was never married to the first guy, so then he gave a get. It didn't mean anything, but it didn't make a difference because he was never married to her. And then the second guy is the one who she's really married to, so that they could continue to be married. That's the Mishnah. Okay, now with regards to the first case was, the man says, I accepted Kiddushin for my daughter, I don't know who I accepted it from. And a guy comes along and says it was me. The Mishnah says, Naaman, he's believed. But says the Gemara, Amar Rav says, Naaman litin get. When we say that he's believed, what we mean is he can't go and be married to her. We mean we believe him that he can give a get to her, and if he gives her a get, we'll let her now marry somebody else. Even though it's entirely possible he's lying. He's not the guy who's married to her. She's really married to some other guy. We have no idea who he is. So when he gives a get, it doesn't do anything. But no, says the Mishnah, Ne'eman, we believe him that he's married to her, as long as, insofar as we will allow him to give a get, and that will permit her to remarry. However, ve'ein ne'eman lichnos. But we do not believe him to allow him to marry her. Why? What's the difference? Why do we believe him that he's the one who's married to her, that he can give her a get, but we won't believe him that he's the one who's married to her, that he can actually be married to her? So that he explains, Ne'eman litin get, we believe him to give a get, because ein adam chotev v'lo lo. Person doesn't sin if he doesn't get any benefit, any pleasure out of it. So why would he just pretend that he was the guy who was married to her if that doesn't do anything for him? If he can't actually be married to her, all he's going to do is give her a get and make somebody else a sinner, that he wouldn't lie because of that. In other words, imagine if he's really lying, right? So really it was somebody else who gave her Kiddushin, and she's married to someone, and he comes and says, it was me, and here's your get. So what's that going to do? All that's going to do is allow her to marry somebody else. He doesn't get any benefit from that. Now, why would he lie and sin and cause her, destruction, that she's really a married woman and she's going to go and marry somebody else? He has no pleasure from that, no benefit. So he wouldn't do that. So therefore we believe him insofar as to say, I'm the husband, and here's your get, and you can go and marry somebody else. However, ve'ein ne'eman lichnos, but we don't believe him to go and marry her, because ema yitzro tokfo, because we're concerned that maybe his Yetzer Hara overcame him. Maybe it really wasn't him, but he sees an opening. He sees an opening, the father has no idea who he accepted Kiddushin from. He could just step in and say, it was me, and now look, he's married to her. But maybe that's just his Yetzer Hara, his evil inclination getting the better of him, and there, he'd be sinning, but he'd be getting a pleasure, he'd be getting a benefit to being married to this woman. There we don't believe him. However, so that's the opinion of Rav. Rav says we only believe him insofar as we'll allow him to give her a get, to allow her to remarry, but we won't believe him to allow him to be married to her. Rav Asi says, Af ne'eman lichnos. That Rav Asi says, no, he's even believed that he can marry her. However, Umode Rav Asi, but Rav Asi will agree, V'omeres niskadashti ve'eni odas lami niskadashti. Rav Asi will agree that if she says, I accepted Kiddushin, ve'eni odas lami niskadashti, but I don't know who I accepted Kiddushin from. So this is instead of the father, it's the woman herself says, some man gave me Kiddushin, I don't remember who it was. I don't know who it was. And then along comes a guy and says it was me, I gave her Kiddushin. Rav Asi agrees that in that case, he is not believed to give her Kiddushin. Again, I should just mention, the point here is that we don't have Eidim coming forth. We don't have any witnesses. Usually, there's witnesses on the Kiddushin. There have to be witnesses. There must have been witnesses. Kiddushin only works with witnesses, but they're not here now. So normally we could just check with the witnesses. Here we don't have witnesses. They're not here to be able to check with them. So she says, I accepted Kiddushin from someone. And he says it was me. Says Rav Asi, there I agree that we don't believe him. Now the Gemara here doesn't explain, but we'll see later the Gemara will quote a Bryce, so the Bryce is going to tell us why. So we'll come back to that soon. Okay, but first we will have a question from our Mishnah on the opinion of Rav. So Rav said that if a man accepts Kiddushin on behalf of his daughter, and then says, I don't know who the man was, who I betrothed my daughter to, and a man comes forth and says it was me, the Mishnah said he's Ne'eman, he's believed, but Rav said he's only believed to give a get, but not to actually marry her. So ask the Gemara Tanam, but let's look at the other part of the Mishnah. The other part of the Mishnah saying, Ratsu, that in the case where two people come forth, and one says it was me, and the other one says it was me, Echad nosen get ve'echad konis. One of them gives a get, and the other one is allowed to marry her. 1 second, why all of a sudden are we letting one of them marry her? When it's only one guy, according to Rav, it says Ne'eman, he's believed, but he can't marry her, he could give her a get. Here it's two people come forth. One says it was me, the other one says it was me. All of a sudden, the Mishnah says very explicitly, Echad Konis, the second guy is allowed to marry her. So it seems, so why would one person be any different? It seems that when it says Ne'emar in the beginning of the Mishnah, that he's believed, it seems like he should be believed even to be able to marry her. Tiyufta de Rav. This seems to be a refutation of Rav. So Amar Lecha Rav, so Rav will say to you, no, there's a difference between when one person is making the claim and two people are making the claim. Shani Hasam. There it's different when it's two people. Dekevan deika acher bahadei. Since there's another person there, irtuse mirsos, he would be scared to lie and say, and go ahead and marry her, because he's afraid that maybe the father will recognize that it was actually the other guy. So, in other words, when there's one person that comes forward, so what happened? The father accepted Kiddushin. He said, I can't remember who the guy was. So there's a charlatan. He wants to step in and pretend it was him. So it's true the father might call him out on it, but he might be willing to risk, and at least according to Rav. And that's really the crux of the dispute between Rav and Rav Asi. Rav Asi said he is believed because he wouldn't take that risk. The father might realize it wasn't, I don't know who it was, but I know it wasn't you, right? So that's a risk that he's taking. So Rav Asi says he wouldn't do that, he wouldn't lie. But Rav says, no, we're afraid he might lie, because he realizes the father doesn't know what the guy looks like. Maybe, he could pass himself off. So that's if there's only one guy. That's why Rav says he's only believed to give a get, but not, because again, like we said before, the logic is he wouldn't lie about just to be able to give a get, but he would lie maybe to try and marry her. That's why we say we can't believe him to actually remain married to her. That's when there's only one person. But when there's two people, so then there's less of a concern, at least, that the second person is lying. So, and I don't think the order makes so much of a difference, but it kind of plays itself out. One guy comes forward and says, it was me. So at that moment, Rav would say, we don't believe you. Now another guy comes forward and says, it was me. So already the second guy, he's taking a major risk, because maybe it really was the first guy, and the father will recognize it. If the real guy comes forward, the father might recognize him, so the second guy's taking a major risk. So that's where we would say that we could believe him. Now, even if I think you could flip it back the other way, they're both sticking by their story, so even the first guy now is more believed because there's another guy now in the picture, and yet he's sticking for his story. He's not afraid, that the father's going to recognize the other guy. So they're both kind of taking a major risk. So there's more credibility to their claims. Now, obviously, one of them is lying, so how do we determine? So the Mishnah says that if they can agree, and one guy says, I'll give a get, and the other guy says, I'll marry her, so we assume, basically, that this is what Rav is claiming. Rav is suggesting, in that situation, we'll assume that they're each taking their proper positions then. Because the guy who's agreeing to give the get, well, why isn't he insisting on marrying her? Because he's actually a little nervous that if he insists on marrying her, the father might recognize it's really the other guy and he'll get in trouble. So that's why he's saying, I'll give the get. He volunteers to give the get. The guy who's sticking to his guns and insisting that, no, you give the get, I'm going to marry her, he's the one who must have, likely was the one who really was married to her and really accepted the Kiddushin, and therefore, in that case, Rav will, in that case, we will believe the second guy. But when there's only one guy, Rav says, no, we don't believe him to allow him to remain married to her. Okay. Now the Gemara says, Tanya Kavasei Rav Asi. We have a brisa that is a proof for Rav Asi. The brisa says, Kidashti SBT. If a man says, I accepted Kiddushin for my daughter, Ve'engiyo de'elami Kidashtia, but I don't know who I accepted the Kiddushin from, Uba Echad ve'amar Kidashtia. and along came a person and says, I am the one, I'm the man who gave her Kiddushin, Af ne'eman lichnos, he's even believed to remain married to her. So we have an explicit brisa, like Rav Asi, that he's believed to remain married to her. Kansa. Now what if he married her? He remained married to her. Uba acher ve'amar ani kedashti. And then a second guy came along and said, actually it was me. But it was only after the first guy, Kansa, maybe he did Nisu, and he finished, he consummated, or he actually was married to her. And then another guy came along and says, it was me. He's not believed to ask her, to forbid her on her first husband. We believed the first husband, we accepted what he said, and they are now married, and we're not going to let another guy come in and say, actually it was really me. We won't believe him. Now, this was the other case. This was a case where we said that Rav Asi will agree. If the woman says, I accept the Kiddushin, but I don't know who I accepted the Kiddushin from. And the guy came along, and he said, Ani Kiddashtiya, I'm the one who gave the Kiddushin. So in that case, as opposed to in the case of where the father accepted it, here it's the woman accepted the Kiddushin, she doesn't know who it was. Ein ne'eman lichnos. The guy who comes along is not believed to be able to marry her. And we said earlier, we would explain the reason why is it that when she accepts the Kiddushin and doesn't know who it was, and a guy comes and says it was me, we don't believe him, we don't allow him to be married to her, because mipnei shahim chafe alav, because we're concerned that she might be covering for him. Maybe what happened is that she accepted Kiddushin from someone, she doesn't know who. Now that puts her in a big, predicament. And she could go her whole life now as an iguna if the proper guy doesn't step forward with witnesses. Now, who knows? Maybe she'll meet a guy and she'll like him, and we're afraid that her Yetzer Hara will get the best of her, his Yetzer Hara will get the best of him, and he'll claim that I was the guy who gave her Kiddushin originally, and she didn't say, and how can you say that? Maybe she'll recognize him and realize it wasn't him. Well, but maybe they're in, they planned this together. So because of that concern, we won't believe him in this scenario. When it's the father, we're not concerned about that, Rav Asi will say. The father will call him out, you weren't the guy. But in this case, she might not call him out and say, you weren't the guy, because maybe she likes him, and she's covering for him. So in this case, until we have Eidim, until we have witnesses, if she says she accepted Kiddushin, until we have witnesses as to who she accepted the Kiddushin from, we cannot believe her if she says, and the guy says that they were the people. Okay. The Gemara says, Ibaylu, they asked the following question. Mahu lisko al yado. What's the halacha in terms of giving skila, stoning, based on the father's report? So, in other words, a man comes and he says, I accepted Kiddushin on behalf of my daughter, but I don't know who it was, and we don't have any witnesses that happened. So, we said that we believe him that she can't marry until we find out who it was. Although if a man comes forward, we believe him to give the get, but otherwise, she's an iguna. She's married to someone, we don't know who it is. Now, what about skila? What if she then lives with another man, and she's a betrothed woman, she's a mu'urasa, so that's adultery. So would she get skila? Usually the punishment for at least if she was a naira, if she would be a naira hamurasa, if she would be in the status of a naira, which is that 12 to 12 and a half year old age, so then her punishment is skila. So could we give skila based on this report? The father reported that she was betrothed. She then went and committed adultery. But we only know that she was betrothed because her father claimed it. So is that punishable by skila? That's the Gemara's question. So the Gemara says, Rav Amar Ein Soklin. No, we wouldn't give skila. Rav Asi Amar Soklin. But Rav Asi says, yes, we would give skila. And the Gemara explains, Rav Amar Ein Soklin. Rav says we wouldn't give skila because ki heimnei rachmana la'av. Even though the Torah gave credibility to the father to report that his daughter was betrothed, it's from a pasuk, esbiti nasati la'ish hazeh. I gave my daughter to this man. We believed the father that he betrothed his daughter, but le'isura. We only believe him as far as forbidding her to be married to anybody else. However, l'ktala lo heimnei. But we do not believe him to get her killed. So this is even in the case where we know who the man is. So, but we don't have the witnesses here. But the father, the Torah seems to testify, that seems to say that the father is believed. So we'll believe him if he says, this is your husband, that now she can't be married to anybody else. But if she does go and live with somebody else, we're not going to punish based on just the testimony of the father that she's married. That would require witnesses that she's actually married. However, Rav Asi Amar Soklin, Rav Asi says, no, we would even give skila, lekula milsehem nerachmana lav. For everything the father is believed, meaning for the full gamut of what that means to report that his daughter is married. It's not just that she can't marry somebody else. We also believe the father that now, if she committed adultery, she would be punished by stoning. Amar Rav Asi, now Rav Asi says, umodina, now I agree, Be'omeres niskadashti she'ein soklin. I agree that if she says she was betrothed, and then she goes and commits adultery, she would not get skila. Now, that's very interesting. She's saying she's married, and then she goes and lives with somebody else, no skila. The Amar Rav Asi says, Hanishmaitza didi, these teachings of mine, marpasan igri, they break roofs. Meaning they're very difficult to understand what I'm saying. Because I'm telling you that if the father says she's married, she's betrothed, and then she goes and lives with somebody else, she gets skila. But if she says she's betrothed, and she goes and lives with somebody else, she does not get skila. Now he says, this is very difficult to understand. He says, I understand. Because I'll tell you what you're probably bothered by. He says, "Makom she'im ba lichnos kones amart soklin makom she'im ba lichnos ein kones eino din shesoklin." This is how he sets it up. He says, in a situation where, remember, Rav Asi says that when the father says, "I betrothed her to a man," and then a man comes forward and says, "It was me," so we allow him to marry her. Naaman, he's believed even to marry her. So, now, if we were so concerned about the Kiddushin that the father accepted from somebody, why are we believing this guy? Who says it's this guy? So it's almost like we don't fully believe the father that he accepted Kiddushin, and that's why we'll allow her to marry a guy who comes forward. And yet, in that case, we'll say that on the father's word, if she's married only, betrothed only on the father's word, and she goes and commits adultery, she gets skila? Do we believe the father or not? If we believe him, and we're willing to give her skila, then why are we letting a guy come forward and say it was me, and live with her? On the other hand, makom, in the case she'im balachnos enkon, is in the case where she says, I accepted Kiddushin, and somebody comes forward and says it was me. And we say, no, you can't, we don't believe you. We think it's somebody else. Which means we think she's really married to somebody. But then if she commits adultery, we don't give her skila? If we think she's married to somebody, we would give her skila. So how do we reconcile all this? So Rav Asi says, yeah, it's difficult to logically, but below, it's very simple actually. La'av heimnei rachmana, l'dida lo heimnei rachmana, lo heimna. The bottom line is, the father, we believe that he accepted Kiddushin for her. We believe he accepted Kiddushin. And that's why if she goes and commits adultery, she gets skila. Now, if somebody comes and says it was me, we believe him, I guess, because he wouldn't lie in the face of the father. We trust him. We think he's the guy that the father accepted Kiddushin from. But if she goes and commits adultery, she gets skila. But the woman, if she says, I was betrothed to somebody, it's not that we believe her that she accepted Kiddushin. The Torah never gives her that authority to create that situation on her own without witnesses, that she's married. And therefore, if she would go and live with somebody else, we wouldn't kill her for that. We don't give her skila for that. So then why is it that if a man comes forward and says it was me, we don't let her live with her? But I thought we don't believe her. Yes, but there's a concept of shavya nafsha chaticha d'isur. She created a piece of isur for herself, a piece of prohibition. She made herself usur. A person can sort of make themselves forbidden. That's what she did. She made herself forbidden to any man because she said, I'm betrothed to someone, I don't know who he is. So she makes herself forbidden to any man. But that doesn't mean we'll kill her if she commits adultery based on that. It means that she creates a prohibition for herself. That she has the ability to do. But we won't go so far as to give skila if she then goes and commits adultery. That's the opinion of Rav Asi. Rav Chisda Amar, and Rav Chisda says, Echad zeh v'echad zeh ein soklin. In either case, we would not give skila. Whether it's her who reported that she was betrothed and then went and committed adultery, or it was the father who said she's betrothed and then she committed adultery. Either way, there's no skila. Va'azda Rav Chisda l'tamei. Rav Chisda went according to his reasoning, and what that means is Rav Chisda held the father is not believed to create a situation where his child will be punished for their actions. In other words, we don't trust the father on his own to create a situation where we can punish the child. So in this case, we don't believe him that she's married to the extent that we would punish her with skila based on his word. We see he goes according to his reasoning, he holds this in other places. Da'amar Rav Chisda, because Rav Chisda says, this first case actually is not a case where we would punish the child, but actually where we would punish an adult who had relations with the child. So if let's say we have an adult who is, let's say, a forbidden relative to a child, a situation where they're forbidden to marry and forbidden to have relations. So if the adult does have relations with this child, so it depends on the age whether it's considered a bia that, obviously it's a horrible act either way, but it has to be considered a bia, it has to be considered intercourse for them to get killed for it. And therefore, it depends on the child's age. So if it's a boy, he would have to be at least 9 years old for it to be considered a bia. So if it was let's say a forbidden a woman, a relative that's forbidden for him to marry, a sister or something who's an adult. So if they would have relations, so if the boy was at least 9 years old, so that would be considered a bia, considered intercourse, and the woman could be killed for that. The adult. And for a girl, it's already from 3 years old. So if a man had relations with a 3-year-old or older, so then that's considered a bia, that's considered intercourse. And if they were a forbidden relation, again, either way it's a horrible act, but if they were a forbidden relation, so then he would get killed for that. But let's say we only know their age based on the father's testimony. So Rav Chisda said, if a man says, B'ni zeh ben teisha shana v'yom echad, my son is 9 years old, and one day, Biti zu, meaning he's over 9 years old. Biti zu baskin lo shana v'yom echad, my daughter is at least 3 years old. Ne'eman lekarban, aval lo lamakos v'lo la'onshin. So if a person had relations with them unintentionally, meaning not knowing that it was a forbidden relative, so they could be chayav a karban. We could obligate them to bring a karban for an unintentional sin, but that's not a punishment. That's an atonement. Avalola makos, but they wouldn't get makos, which is the usual punishment, lashes for an unintentional act. And we wouldn't kill them for an intentional act because we only know that this child is of age based on the father's testimony. The father's not believed on his own without witnesses to create that situation. Just on his own to say, oh, he's 9, she's 3, which would get the person who had relations with them killed. That's not, the father doesn't have that credibility on his own. And Tanya Kavasei Rav Chisda. We have a brisa that fits in with Rav Chisda, a little bit of a different case, but very similar. Here we're talking about at what point a child is bar or bas mitzvah. reaches age of adulthood, that their words carry weight in the following way. If he says, Benize, well, let me just mention, so in order for a child to really midoraisa by Torah law be considered a full-fledged adult, it's not just that a boy has to be 13 and a girl has to be 12. They also have to have reached physical maturity, which is usually marked by the appearance of 2 pubic hairs. Shtei cyrus, we call it. So if we know that they have that physical maturity, that shtei cyrus, but we don't know that they're of age yet, then, let's say we know they're not of age yet. They're not yet. The boy's not 13, the girl's not 12. So then we assume the shtei cyrus is not really a sign of physical maturity. It must just be that, it's something unnatural, it's a wart or something. It's only once they have both age, 13 for a boy, 12 for a girl, and the shtei cyrus, the physical maturity, so then they are midoraisa by Torah law, an adult. So let's say we know the physical maturity is there. We know they have shtei cyrus. We don't know the age, except for on the word of the father. So Benize ben Yogimel Shana. The man says, my son, he's 13 v'yom he's over 13, he's 13 any day, he's into his 13th year, his 14th year. Biti zu bas yod beishana v'yom echad. And my daughter is 12 years old and a day. She's over 12. So Nema l'nedarim u'lecharamim u'ekdeshos u'le'arachim. So he's believed in that their words will carry weight if they donate, if they take a neder, if they take a vow, u'lecharamim, or they donate something to the Beis HaMikdash, u'ekdeshos. Another way to donate to the Beis HaMikdash. U'le'arachim. Arachim is also where you dedicate the value of yourself. It's a pledge to donate money, but based on the value of yourself or of somebody else. So for that, they're believed. They're considered adult based on the testimony of the father and the physical maturity for these types of things. These are not punishments, though. But not for anything that would affect a situation where there would be any punishment of makos, of lashes, or of onshin, or of something more severe. Something more severe, so that the father's not believed to announce their age. So that's the opinion of Rav Chisda. The father is never believed on his own, without witnesses, to describe a status for his child, his son or daughter, that will cause them to receive a punishment. So he's not believed about their age in terms of them receiving a punishment. He also, in our case, according to Rav Chisda, will not believe to say that his daughter is betrothed if there are no witnesses. If, in terms of that she could end up being punished for an act that follows, like if she lived with another man, adultery, we wouldn't punish her for that because we cannot punish just based on the word of the father. Okay, we'll pick up with a new Mishnah on Samach Dal Ram Aleph next time.